I didn't think I was a jealous woman. For most of my life, I believed jealousy was loud, insecure, almost theatrical, something you could see in raised voices, suspicious questions, dramatic accusations that fill the room with tension. I told myself I was more evolved than that, more self-aware, more emotionally intelligent, especially after years of reading, reflecting, and slowly untangling the anxious parts of my attachment patterns. I had convinced myself that I understood love in a mature way, that I could trust without gripping, that I could let someone exist in the world without constantly measuring what that world was giving him in return. But 2026 feels different. The jealousy I started feeling wasn't loud at all. It didn't slam doors or demand passwords. It arrived quietly, almost politely, in the form of small, invasive thoughts that slipped into my mind while I was washing dishes or scrolling before bed. It was the kind of jealousy that didn't accuse him of doing anything wrong, yet somehow made me question everything. And what unsettled me the most was not his behavior. It was how quickly my mind could manufacture threats out of pixels, pauses, and patterns that didn't even exist a decade ago. We live in a world now where attention is currency and attention is visible. I can see who liked his photo within seconds. I can see when he was last online. I can see when someone new follows him, and sometimes I can even guess why. Algorithms have become silent narrators in our relationships, constantly feeding us micro-evidence that invites comparison. It's not that he betrayed me. It's that the system keeps offering me data, and my nervous system doesn't always know how to interpret it calmly. At first, I told myself it was harmless curiosity, just a glance, just awareness, just modern transparency. But awareness without emotional regulation becomes surveillance, and surveillance slowly becomes obsession. I remember one night when I noticed he had liked a woman's picture, someone I didn't know. Someone effortlessly beautiful in a way that felt curated for maximum impact. I stared at that tiny red heart longer than I want to admit. It wasn't even recent. It had happened hours before. Yet my body reacted as if I had discovered something intimate and secretive. My chest tightened. My thoughts raced. I imagined conversations that had never happened, emotional connections that existed only in my projections. I wasn't reacting to reality. I was reacting to possibility. That S when I began to understand something unsettling. Jealousy in 2026 isn't triggered by events. It's triggered by access. We now have access to fragments of each other as digital lives that were never meant to carry so much psychological weight. A like, a follow, a comment with a subtle emoji. These fragments are neutral in isolation, but when filtered through insecurity, they expand into narratives that feel real enough to hurt. And because everything is archived and visible, there is no natural forgetting. The evidence stays, the comparisons accumulate. What scares me is how easy it is to confuse visibility with truth. There was a time when, if a man found someone attractive, I would never know unless he chose to act on it. Attraction was private, fleeting, human. Now, attraction leaves digital footprints. And even if those footprints are harmless, they become measurable. They become something I can count, compare, and replay. The human brain was not designed to process this volume of relational data without consequence. Sometimes I would catch myself scrolling through women he followed, analyzing their faces, their bodies, their captions, trying to decode what exactly appealed to him. Was it confidence? Youth? A certain aesthetic? I would then, almost unconsciously, compare those traits to my own reflection. The mirror became less about self-perception and more about competition. And that was the moment I felt the shift. This wasn't about him anymore. It was about me measuring my worth against strangers. I thought I was secure, but security in theory is very different from security in an environment engineered to amplify comparison. Even women I know who are strong, independent, financially stable, and emotionally intelligent admit that something about this era makes jealousy more intrusive. It's not that we trust our partners less. It's that we are constantly exposed to alternatives. The marketplace of attention never closes. There was a week when I convinced myself I had resolved it. I deleted certain apps from my phone. I decided to stop checking. I told myself that if he wanted to betray me, no amount of monitoring would prevent it. And if he didn't, my anxiety was only poisoning something that might otherwise be peaceful. For a few days, I felt lighter, my mind was quieter. I even felt proud of my discipline, as if I had reclaimed control from a system designed to provoke me. Relief felt real, but it was fragile, because the moment I reinstalled the app just to check something, the old pattern returned with frightening speed. It was humbling to see how quickly my nervous system slipped back into hypervigilance. That as when I stopped pretending this was just about digital boundaries and started asking a more uncomfortable question. Why was I so afraid of being replaced? Jealousy is rarely about the other person's behavior. It's about our fear of being insufficient. In 2026, insufficiency is constantly curated and displayed. Every scroll presents someone younger, more polished, more adventurous, more aligned with whatever trend is currently rewarded. Even if my relationship was stable, even if he treated me with care, the ambient noise of comparison seeped into my subconscious. It whispered that love is conditional, that attention can shift instantly, that there is always someone one swipe away. I began to reflect on my own history. I realized that long before social media intensified it, I carried a subtle fear of abandonment. As a girl, I learned to be impressive, adaptable, accommodating, not because I was manipulative, but because I sensed that approval ensured safety. So when modern platforms magnified visibility and comparison, they simply activated something that was already there. Technology didn't create my jealousy. It exposed it. That realization hurt, but it was also strangely empowering. If the root wasn't his behavior or the algorithm, then it meant the work was internal. Around that time, I revisited passages from a relationship psychology ebook I had once read quietly to myself during a period of self-doubt, and I remember underlining a sentence about how jealousy often masks unprocessed fear rather than actual betrayal. It felt less like advice and more like a mirror. I wasn't fighting other women. I was fighting an old narrative about my replaceability. Still, knowing this intellectually didn't immediately dissolve the feeling. There were nights when I lay beside him, watching his calm breathing, and wondered if my mind was inventing threats simply because it was accustomed to scanning for danger. Hyper-awareness can feel like intuition, but they are not the same. Intuition is grounded and clear. Hypervigilance is frantic and speculative. And in a world saturated with stimuli, hypervigilance is rewarded. Sometimes I questioned whether jealousy is worse in 2026 because relationships are weaker or because we are more aware of what could threaten them. We see breakups announced in real time. We see emotional infidelity dissected publicly. We watch perfect couples unravel through curated confessionals. The illusion of stability feels thinner. Commitment feels less sacred and more negotiable. But then I asked myself something even more destabilizing. Was I mistaking exposure for inevitability? Just because I can see more potential threats doesn't mean those threats are chosen. Just because alternatives exist doesn't mean I am disposable. The mind, however, doesn't always differentiate between availability and action. It reacts to possibility as if it were probability. In the final months of that year, I decided to experiment with a different approach. Instead of monitoring him, I began observing myself. When jealousy rose, I didn't immediately open an app or interrogate a detail. I sat with the sensation in my body. I noticed the tightening in my stomach, the subtle urge to compare, the internal dialogue that insisted I was about to lose something. I traced the feeling backward, asking gently where it began. Often, it led me to memories unrelated to him, moments in childhood where affection felt conditional, times when attention shifted abruptly and I felt invisible. That's when the internal shift happened. I realized I was not afraid of him choosing someone else. I was afraid of not being enough even if he stayed. Jealousy had become a mirror reflecting my relationship with myself, and once I saw that, the intensity began to soften. Not because the digital world changed, not because other women disappeared, not because he altered his behavior dramatically, but because I stopped outsourcing my sense of value to an ecosystem designed to provoke insecurity. I began investing more intentionally in my own growth, my own friendships, my own work, so that my identity was not reduced to being chosen. Love became something I participated in, not something I competed for. Jealousy in 2026 may feel worse because the environment is louder, faster, more comparative than ever before. But the deeper truth I uncovered is that jealousy thrives where self-trust is fragile. When I strengthened my internal foundation, the external noise lost some of its power. I still feel moments of insecurity. I am human. But they no longer define the narrative of my relationship. They inform me, they point me inward. And in that inward movement, I found something far more stable than constant monitoring: self-awareness. I've shared the journey of learning to recognize what truly matters in love, boundaries, and self-awareness. If you want a gentle guide to understanding your own patterns, gaining clarity, and cultivating meaningful connections, this ebook can support that reflection. You can download the ebook in the description. The link is in the description.